We're live, everybody.
All right, welcome everybody to this Sunday evening of Investigation Check. I am your host, Ninja Spence 21, and then who do I have with me at this digital investigative table?
I'm Frey.
I'm Hewitt slash Miro.
Nasa does cosplay.
All right, and then before we actually get up into today's well, sorry about that, tonight's topic, then that that we do have a donation going on until around March. That this is for the Trevor Project, and that the Trevor Project is to basically help those of that the LGBTQ and trans community that has been displaced due to some unfortunate and jerkish people in their lives. So if you can, there's
Shitty
a
parents.
donate button at the bottom, and then that'll be much appreciated. Thank you. And speaking of parenthoods and heritage and such like that, you see, segue. That's how radio works.
I was about to apologize, Spence, for doing
And
that
then that
interruption.
we are going to be talking about D&D ancestry, and everybody knows about that. The We are not going to be talking about like that the stat blocks of basically what that the races came up with and such like that. We are actually going to be talking about that the IRL or else real life inspiration behind these races. So who would like to go first of their lovable playable race?
I will, if I can vote, I say we let Nasa go first because she's gone last the last couple times we've done something
Yes.
like this.
I don't mind going last.
You have been talking about tieflings since I have met you. Go
I
ahead and
love my
go ahead and splurge your evil little fiendish horny boys. Go
I
ahead.
love my horny babies. Okay,
Hold on.
shut up, Spencer.
No. We're picking you up on your mic and Spence's mic for a weird reverb.
Oh, sorry about that.
All right. Try
Okay,
again.
how do we want to fix that?
I think Spence just mute himself, so it's good.
Okay. Okay. So I yes. So tieflings are my favoritist of all of the D&D ancestries, all of the D&D uh, player character options, because they're one of the most variable and customizable in the way that you can create them and play them. Uh, the origins of the concept and the term are kind of tied in together. Obviously, in D&D, we know that tieflings are considered to be any so-called plain touched individual that has been corrupted, tainted, or otherwise affected by any of the energies from the so-called lower planes. Generally, this is Asmodeus and the Nine Hells, the devils of the D&D universe, versus the demons of the abyss. Uh, the concept of the term tiefling actually goes back all the way to advanced D&D. They needed a way to call these devilish inspired monsters, these NPCs, um, that wasn't going to draw the attention of the satanic panic of the 70s and 80s. So it's the rumor, the long-standing legend here is that Wolfgang Bauer, one of the game designers from TSR, combined the German word tief, Tief, which means deep or low, with the ling suffix to translate as offspring from the lower planes or the lower flames. There's another potential option where the German word for devil is Teufel, Teufel, which could have also been a good springboard for the actual naming of the creature. 1 second, I gotta grab new tabs. So, in the throughout the iterations that tieflings have gone through, um, since advanced D&D through 3 and 3.5 and 4, Um, and into 5e, uh, it's kind of become more of a catch-all term. Originally as strictly NPC fodder, um, these creatures were affiliated with um, a specific iteration, a specific nationality, I guess, from one of the original settings, um, the former empire of Baal Tarath. These humans had uh, entered into a pact as a whole nation with Asmodeus, and their descendants were basically a physical embodiment of said pact. Um, but through through all of this, it's basically come to just be considered as any plain touched individual um, that can draw or is touched by power from the lower realms. Um, there's a whole lot of different ish that goes on in the way they've morphed through the years, but it wasn't until 4e and 5e that tieflings actually became player character option. And there was some weird mechanicalizing that they had to do to apparently scale them back a little bit because mechanically tieflings originally were quite OP compared to other player character race options. Um, Throughout human history, the concept of devils or creatures of infernal origin has been something that inhabits the mental subspace of human existence. Um, for the Christian world, it takes the form of Lucifer, the fallen angel, become devil lord of the opposite of heaven, which is hell. Second. For the Islamic um, culture and persuasion, there's a similar concept, um, the shaitan, or shayatin. These are pure evil spirits. They're opposite to the jinn or to humans. Um, they exist purely to, and I quote, entice humans and jinn to sin by whispering to their hearts. Um, they may teach sorcery. Uh, Here it says that they assault heaven to steal the news of the angels. Um, the term shaitan was adopted by the um, Roman Catholic tradition to specifically relate and describe Lucifer. That's actually where we get the term Satan, and where the concept of satanic actually draws its etymology is from the uh, Islamic shaitan. Uh, so even as far back as the early Middle East, the concept of a direct opposite to to angelic creatures, to pure good creatures in the form of pure evil creatures, um, is ingrained in the human psyche. And as with anything that is pure, the concept of corruption lends itself naturally. Um, the idea of a corrupting influence blending and morphing itself with the mortal, with the human, is what has given rise to many of the so-called monsters that we read about, that we utilize in our various forms of fiction. Um, and the same is true with the concept of half devils or devil touched type of individuals. Um, so I mean, there's a long, we could almost say, as long as humankind has been around, devil kind has been around, and therefore the crossbreeding has been a potential in the headspace. Um, in modern fiction, there's quite a few iterations of tiefling or devil-inspired individuals. Um, I specifically wanted to talk about the big four here. With Marvel comics, we obviously have Azazel, which I loved his spotlight in X-Men First Class. Um, what a lot of people don't um, may not know is that Azazel is considered is canonically the father of not only Nightcrawler but a few other um, very demonic creatures as well. Um, Nightcrawler himself is a very stereotypical tiefling type of individual. Um, Spencer and I were talking earlier, and I was like, you could literally build a tiefling and give it the shadow touched feet, and that would just be Nightcrawler. Just make him a rogue and a barbarian, and you're good to go. Um, the one thing that's really cool about Nightcrawler that has always been um, a favorite aspect for me is that Nightcrawler is canonically Catholic and has a lot of religious guilt surrounding his mutation. And if that's not a typical edgelord tiefling, I don't know what is. Um, in keeping with the Catholic theming and everything, the video game series Devil May Cry has some very obviously half demon type of characters in it. Dante, Nero, Virgil um, are all demon blooded or devil blooded. Um, and I haven't ever played the games, but I know that that's a main thing there. Um, my other big, very obviously a tiefling type of character is Hellboy from Mike Mignola comic. Um, Hellboy is your stereotypical tiefling, everything from the red skin, the horns, the tail, and the hellfire connotations. Um, the if we're going to get into all of the particular semantics, Hellboy's technically a Cambion, Cambion being a direct offspring between a devil and a human female. Um, Cambion are very like very particular in the traditional etymologies. So Hellboy is technically Cambion, but Tiefling, as we said, is catch-all, so it works. Go grab one more tab.
While you're looking at it, Nasa, I'm going to say this: Cambions are one of the best, like mid bosses for a campaign you're throwing at people.
Oh, believe me, I know. I have had much the fun looking at them.
Oh, they
Um,
they're always fun because
so
they're just evil enough.
yeah. Um, so the one kind of unexpected clincher here for my tiefling demon babies topic is actually Merlin, the Arthurian Merlin. There are some versions of the accounts that say that Merlin perhaps was begotten by an incubus or some other upper category of demon, and that's actually where he drew most of his prophetic abilities and most of his magical inclinations. The let's see here. Some of it invests Merlin with the ability to speak fluently even as a newborn, a preternatural knowledge of the past and present, um, his ability to shapeshift, his supposed joking or rather ironic way of speaking. Um, there's a lot of it that just kind of it's a very interesting take that paints him as a much more mysterious and or sinister figure, um, and kind of gives you the wonder of so why was he the power behind the throne kind of thing. It was just a really cool thing to kind of come across that Merlin keeps company with these more alien-looking creatures as Nightcrawler, as Hellboy. It was just a fun little side tidbit there. But that's really all I've got is the yeah, tieflings rule.
Alrighty then. Yes, they do. In fact, do rule. I mean that that I'm playing one in the shop game and such, and then that been having a blast with that. But who else wants to go next?
I will.
Okay.
I am doing. I looked into halfling, and mine's kind of a little mix of what inspired them, what they're like in game, and just some little different tidbit facts that I found out about them. So halflings, obviously the idea of them predate D&D. It even predates Lord of the Rings. Halfling actually comes from the Scottish word hoflin, which means an awkward, rustic teenager who is neither man nor boy, and so half of both. Another word for halfling is hobbledehoy, or also a hobby. But it can't be argued by anyone that D&D halflings weren't a direct lift from Lord of the Rings. As a matter of fact, Gygax was using them even before D&D, because in 1971, he and Jeff Perrin created a medieval miniature strategy war game called Chainmail. It was what D&D was before it was D&D. And halflings actually got their first appearance in this early version, and they were still referred to as hobbits. They were also included in the original 1978 Player's Handbook.
Hold on. M, you're not coming through.
Oh, hello?
Now you are. Sorry. Edit. Sorry. Ignore me. I'm just the staff and the technical support in
Well,
the
then stop yelling!
background.
Then stop yelling into your mic! Where'd you lose me?
At the start of your last sentence.
What my last sentence was.
It was right after you mentioned them being in the Player's Handbook in 77.
78.
Whatever.
Yeah, so they were, until the release of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, they were referred to as hobbits. But then the Tolkien estate sent a cease and desist letter, and TSR was forced to very hastily rename them, among other creatures like Ents and the Balrog. But more about the actual race themselves, halflings. A lot of this, anyone who knows anything about D&D halflings is going to know, but halflings stand somewhere between 2 feet 8 inches, and if you guys don't stop posting on Discord, I'm going to throw something at somebody. Because all I'm hearing is beep, 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 beep.
I was just saying Yoda is a wizard.
Stop it!
Fight me.
I'm going to come in there and fight you.
You'll win.
Yeah, I will. Anyway. But, where was I? Halflings stand somewhere between 2 foot 8 and 3 foot 4, usually weigh between 30 to 35 pounds. They're usually stated to have about the same resemblance and proportion as humans, just on a smaller scale with slightly more pointed ears. Male halflings generally don't seem to grow beards, but tend to have longer sideburns. They have an affinity for collecting things, but they don't tend to wear them or flash them around. They tend to be a comfortable style of dress sort of people. And dexterity being their best skill, they lean towards classes that use that a lot, such as rogues. And halflings are generally viewed as a race who likes to remain in the creature comforts of their homes and away from more perilous walks of life, sort of how Bilbo Baggins was before he went on his adventure. Just, I want to stay at home in my cozy house and eat my good food. But there's certainly a number of them who may be nomadic, lured to adventure and great wide somewheres to discover new lands and adventures. And they're known to work well with others, and they're counted as loyal to anyone who they deem friends. Um, there's little hesitation for them to defend their friends and loved ones, even those in the more homebodied subset. They're a race that's easy to defend, to befriend, and they blend easily into society with other races. But really, besides specific stories or campaigns and stuff, they usually don't really have much political ambition to speak of. Besides, again, specific individual story elements, there's no king of the halflings, no nobility or central or social hierarchy that's really followed by the majority to really speak of. Um, it just those things don't really fit into their kind of practical race, and their communities are usually no bigger than shires or hamlets. They have several sub races. Originally there were only two, which was the Lightfoot and the Stout, and over time there's been more added in, of course, and a couple really interesting ones. There's the Ghostwise from Sword Coast Adventures Guide, the Lotus Den from Wildmount, Mark of Hospitality and Mark of Healing in Everon, and Unearthed Arcana has brought in various elemental variants like aquatic, desert, and jungle variant halflings. One interesting subclass I came across popped up with a supplemental source book in 3rd edition called the Book of Vile Darkness, and it's a race known as the Jaren. They're a variant of the Lightfoot, and they can kind of be seen as the halfling equivalent of what a drow would be to an elf. They were once plain-dwelling halflings, but they became subterranean dwellers, and they turned to dark magic because they were desperate to fight off orcs and goblinkin who were threatening to wipe them out. So this made them a very vicious race, and in playing them gains bonuses to bluff and intimidate along with the regular halfling talents. They're a very dark twist on what's normally seen as a very jovial, kind race. And then another variant, which is even older, is called the Wisplings. They're actually descendants of demons and halflings. They're very similar to halflings in tieflings in that they have horns. They have a Dex or Charisma bonus and an affinity for certain types of magic. They also often have red hair. They were written to be leaning towards evil alignments more often than not. Their origin actually goes all the way back to 1981 in the Fiend Folio, which is a supplement to Advanced D&D First Edition. So even though they're similar, they actually predate Tieflings, which I didn't even know anything like Tieflings before that. And then they were updated again back in 2019 in Mordenkainen's Fiendish Folio, Volume 1. And then the Dragonlance series actually has its own subrace of halflings that you only find there. They're from a planet called Kryn, and they're called the Kender. They were described as being incredibly curious, but they have a tendency to borrow things, which means they pretty much stole anything that wasn't tied down. However, they didn't do it for a monetary reason. It's sort of like how we've described goblins a lot in several of our games. It's just stuff, and it's interesting stuff. So I'm gonna take this with me. But they're also described interestingly as being masters of taunting. This paired with their intent.
Hold on.
I got it.
Sorry. You cut out for a second.
I let go of the button. My finger slipped. But they paired with their intense curiosity, it caused them to have very pointed insight in their repertoire of taunts, sarcasm, rudeness, and insults. So apparently they kind of do vicious mockery without casting vicious mockery. There are a couple of just notable heroes within the D&D canon that were halflings. They're normally a modest folk, but there's some famous names worthy of note. One is Regis, who is a halfling rogue member of Dris Duerden's companions. He's a pretty stereotypical halfling, besides a pendant he uses to charm people, and even has some comparisons that I read to Bilbo Baggins for his actions at the end of the book Crystal Shard. Another is Did the Wise, who was a druid in the Wrath of, I can't know if I can say this right, Ashdarlon adventure module. He's the sole survivor of the dragon named in the module destroyed his church, and his tale of revenge is actually part of the module's entire backstory. And the last one I just have a note on is I don't know if it's Lida or Lida. It's Lidda. The halfling rogue is an iconic D&D character. She's appeared several times as part of backstories or tutorials ever since third edition. Um, right now, she's actually in the player's handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Enemies and Allies, along with some primary and secondary roles in the related novels. So she's been featured in a lot of artwork and just background stuff before. But I don't know. I like halflings a lot. From Lord of the Rings and D&D. I always used to say that I would, when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, I would I was like typical teenager. I'd be an elf. I'd be an elf. I would go back and I watched them in The Hobbit as an adult. I'm like, I'm a fucking hobbit. I want to stay in my house. And I want everybody to leave me alone. But yes, some little interesting tidbits I just found in my research.
Little interesting bits for halflings.
I mean, I
Tarp,
see
tarp,
what you
tarp.
did there. I mean that halflings are basically very, like that they are fun to play and that it is very, very interesting in such. Who wants to go next?
Why don't you go next, Spence? I'll finish this up. So I can kind of
Okay,
bookend our talk about Jimothy Ronaldo, Ramuel Tolkien.
okay, fair enough. Well, then that I will be doing the opposite of the tiefling, which I will be doing the ASMR. And before everyone says that Hercules could be considered an ASMR, actually, no, he can never be considered one. He will be known what is a demigod. And basically, the ASMR are actually more close to the Nephilim, which are basically the hybrid sons of fallen angels. And basically, that essentially, and basically, that essentially, well, for it could go up into that the giant to that the giant etymology, but for that the sake of D&D sake and stuff, we will be using the more of the fallen angel definition than that the giant's correlation, because that pretty much that that the etymology of the word itself self is basically all very precarious, and precarious, because I had to look this up, means just basically depending on chance, circumstances, unknown conditions, and or uncertain developments. And then that this is according to Merriam-Webster. But I guess then if that kind of ties up into to basically that the whole aspect of like a god or else a divine being basically having sexual intercourse course with just a mortal, and excuse me, and then basically that the first early sources as the Nephilim are just basically that the sons of heaven as just angels actually had came from the Dead Sea Scrolls. But the actual first commentary on that the Nephilim was created from being of that, I will probably be repeating this again and again about angels mating with humans was stated by the rabbinical Targum Pseudo Jonathan, and it has basically been that the same commonplace of today whereas that basically like a Nephilim slash ASMR is basically that the resort is basically that the result of a basically a human of just a human normally just a male just a female gender with just like human nature and basically mating is just basically mating with just that a son of God also just that a male gender of the divine nature. And then that this is basically paraphrased in Genesis book 6 book 6 verse 4 in the New American Bible. It basically draws a parallel to the Epistle of Jude in tangent with just that the verses that I had mentioned previously, for basically that they are again the heavenly beings that just basically come to earth and basically that they want to explore mortal flesh. And then that and then that it is also it is also suggested that up in the Jerusalem Bible, it could basically suggest that there can be an antecedent for a superhuman race. Now, as that we all know that Asamir are basically that up in D terms that they are equivalent of basically that a good deity basically had wanted to bless a mortal, just a mortal with a chosen champion, which then why then that they always kind of basically lean towards like taking paladins or else clerics wise. And then that they had actually appeared up in second edition underneath the name the Deva, and then that they basically decided to again that TSR was just trying to remove all of the religious references in just lieu and in that influx of that the satanic panic then that they had came up with the name Asamir, which is basically derived from just that a word known as Asamar, which is what basically that the angels had became in 2E. Now, basically, just a little bit more to basically like describe that the ASMR, because then that they can be as much customizable as just that the tieflings can be. But one thing in just specific that you will basically see that the ASMR as basically that they are something just like that they are just uncommonly beautiful, and then that they will still be slightly as tall, and then that they will be known to be plain touch. And sometimes that you will see them with very fair skin, that they will have like pupilless pale white, gray, or golden eyes, and usually like silver to like whitish hair to basically make them stand out with just this one feature. However, that most people in most like games, excuse me, then if they try to basically make it to where that ASMR is mostly 100% human. But for me personally, that cannot be the case, because then that you can basically make them more humanoid. You can basically have them with some sort of elf heritage and still be considered in just ASMR, or just even like a tiefling that is also an ASMR at the same time. Try to explain that one at the altar or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, as far as in that that they're fiendish cousins and bloodlines, that they basically want to be a little bit more cautious, and then that they are always kind of like misunderstood, though just that just never up into that the extent that the fiendish bloodlines were, and then that they were actually sometimes seen as basically signs of good omens, omens, that the whole chosen one trope, and just basically that that they would be basically there for like to be like good folk heroes to basically try to basically fight up against evil, and then that they basically share that empathic bond for others. But not all Asimir are good, that they will be just like Lucifer up in Paradise Lost, that they can become fallen just Asimir, or even sometimes be on the fence, which is basically known as the Scourge Asimir. That they are basically very charismatic and then wise too. So then that's how then that they make great bards, paladins, even warlocks, celestial warlocks. Just then that not all warlocks have to be evil necessarily. Then that they just kind of favor just that divine, and then that arcane magic, and then that basically that's some notable names of just ASMR would basically be Turiel, the cleric of Bahamut, Zale of the Starry Glen, who is a knight of the Blue Moon, Sigray de la Sunya, and yeah, excuse me for butchering this, the Amanian Palette that have founded the Winter Rose Adventuring Company. And then that you got Aiden, the captain of the Blue Gawkus, and that the moon and that the moon in the Moonshade Owl. Now now basically back to our popular culture, that there isn't really like a lot of heroes, and then like one just like one specific being that we can basically attach ASMR to, but yet that that they are still referenced numerous times, such as up in like rock bands such as at the fields of that the Nephilim, and then even like such authors as McFerrin and Cassandra Clare, with just at the Ringquist Quartet and the Shadowhunter Chronicles respectively, have now to have used this concept of just that the plain touch humanoids in their stories. And also a fun fact: the Horsemen of the Apocalypse are stated to be that these demigod children as well, basically Nephilim. And also, as that NASA had brought up, I will be speaking about about that the abysmal 2013 reboot of just Devil May Cry, to where they had changed up the origin stories of Dante and Virgil, which then that they had said that they were supposed to be Nephilim offspring due to that their demon father Sparta, and then at their mother angel Ava. And also up in Magic of the Gathering, the Nephilim are also referred to the old gods from just before modern society. And honestly, that ASMR are one of my most favorite races, about almost tied with Tiefling, in fact, because I think that my first character was actually an ASMR. But that is what I got for ASMR. And finally, we got Miro.
Hey, it's me. Um, so I'm taking one of the most basic original, well, villains slash monster races that you could deal with that eventually became a very big player favorite, especially their partial offspring. So I will be talking to you about orcs. I'm not going to do the voice the whole time, but most of the time people give a Eastern European accent to orcs, especially with a fact I'm going to throw in later on the modern day relation to these. So the earliest recorded written version of the word orc is actually in the poem of Beowulf, or the Epic of Beowulf. They are listed as one of the evil races fought against God. Keep that in note for when we get to something later, because this is why the whole race later on in RPGs usually gets an evil lean that a lot of people aren't happy with. They're also, in a lot of these early legends, kind of related to goblins. They might not be related to goblins. Heck, they might be giants, but however, they're an other that's big, bad, and scary. But for the most part, if you look at some of the other earlier references, which is kind of sparse, they seem to be more closely related to a boggart. Just a much bigger, scarier boggart. So that's kind of an intro to orcs. And this one might hit a little home for NASA. They don't necessarily have a one solid origin for the word orc. So I'm going to go through a few of them. And the first one I have is they think that the word orc might have originally come from Orcus or Hades / Pluto, uh, god of the underworld. So in this idea, the plural of orc is orkneus, which I think I'm pronouncing that right. Which means they could also literally be walking corpses similar to a draugr. In relation to that, Old Norse leans heavy into Orkneys, leaning towards undead and draugr. So there's a chance that orcs in the modern concept should be more undead than goblinoid or their own thing. So there's a chance of that. There's also a word called orde hel defio, which I'm bad at Latin, y'all. Did I do that terrible? Our linguist that's in the group.
It's passable.
Without seeing it, I don't know.
O and the two D looking letters have lines across the top and an E.
Ortha.
Huh?
Those are thorns, so they'd be Ortha.
So Otha hel def diofo. Okay. It means specter or half devil. So right there, connecting back to NASA, there's also a chance that orcs have kind of a tiefling origin or have a connection to them, which I forgot to write down the name for this. The if y'all want to Google it, go Google the tiefling orc version that popped up in 3rd edition. It is horrible and great at the same time. They have the best horns. Now, getting back closer to the language most of us speak, we look at Anglo-Saxon English. And that's why I said close to the language we speak, because Old English is not English. They have a whole lot of pronunciations that don't make sense for the letters that are in it, just like Welsh. But they put them more in the realm of goblinoids. Now, also we get some French and Italian references here that are going to end up being brought in later when we talk about the one, the only father of modern orcs. You have the French orque, which also goes back to the word ogre, or ogre. So we start getting that the French might, the origin of the word orc might be ogre, large man-eaters, or the word orco, not talking about the He-Man friend, but in Italian, it's a large tusked beast in the forest that may or may not eat humans. They definitely kidnap princesses and get killed by princes all the time, though. Standard big bad piggy man. So France and Italy kind of had the same idea, and then also bring in the fact of the Norman conquest in 1066 and French being a massive influence upon the already somewhat Germanic, somewhat Celtic language that would become the bastard child known as English. We kind of start combining these to get some type of creature. Now, then we get to J.R.R. Tolkien, who I was going to start giving him a different set of J.R.R. names to see if one of y'all started to have an eyebrow twitch, but I'll be nice. So,
I did it when you made the joke earlier.
So
there, you won.
Okay. So good old Jimbo Ronnie Ron Tolkien.
I will throw something at you.
He created our modern concept of the word and creature known as an orc. Mostly because orcs are his go-to for bad guys. Those and spiders. This guy had a thing against spiders. Like, I don't know if he got bit by them or what, but he definitely, like, almost everything that's evil is, like, spider adjacent or an orc. Now, the big thing is if you go through The Hobbit, orcs and goblins are about the same thing. Because, I mean, you have Oakenshield, Thorin. The sword he picks up is Orcrist, the foe smite, or the foe hammer. No, that's Glamdring. Glamdring's the foe hammer. But he has Orcus, known as Biter. So you have a blade that the goblins know that's really good at killing goblins, and its name is Orcrist. So as you get further into it, there doesn't seem to be a huge differentiation between orcs and goblins at first. It seems to be an interchangeable term for this indefinable, disfigured, under the ground, slimy bad guy. They vary in size, they vary in disfigurement, and this kind of leans into a lot of earlier descriptions of goblins and goblinoids that even get brought into more modern day writings with Jim Butcher and the Goblins underneath the Earl King, of that they have completely disproportionate, jagged faces that have a geometry to them that doesn't fully make sense and is not great. Especially the Earl King, whose face is so jacked up, somehow it's handsome. So I'm guessing he's walking around like Mickey Rourke. But the big thing is, the common thing is they're tusked and they're brutish and they may or may not eat humans. It depends on the group. And then this gives away to Uruk-hai, the super orcs, the ones that are very close to modern day RPG orcs. They're big, they're beefy, they are evil thick. They are going to come at you with the white hand of Sauron on their face with their jagged blades and yell, "Meat's on the menu tonight," because they definitely eat humans. Now, the big issue with Tolkien's orcs for a lot of people, and I don't see it as a problem, there are multiple cultures across this planet, and we all have a different origin story for where this weird mutated ape that we are ourselves came from. Some people say God, some people say evolution, some people say one god got too frisky with himself while floating on his back in the River Nile and we popped out. So the fact that Tolkien had multiple origins for orcs makes sense. One, they're tainted elves from the east that Morgoth or Sauron got a hold of and made into those ugly, ugly boys that look mildly like Jeffrey Epstein. Which, by the way, no, I'm not joking. Peter Jackson got so pissed at Epstein because Epstein tried to fuck up something in the movie that the cauliflowered ear looking pale ass orc that's trying to take Minas Tirith was literally physically based off of that dude's face. He came out and said, yes, that one that looks there with the syphilitic eyebrows, that is Epstein. So, fun fact, and hashtag don't sue us. But I think it's absolutely hilarious because he listed it as, yeah, it was a fuck you to the producer, and I'm proud of it. So I support that. So the first version is they're tainted elves that got jacked up by Morgoth or by Sauron. The second one is that they are slimy hate mud babies made by Morgoth or Sauron. He made them from the dirt and the slime, and they came forth as evil. Okay, and the other one is they're simply a human-shaped beast that was able to learn languages, and they really hate everybody because people treat them like shit. So, multiple origins within Tolkien's work make sense to me because there's not one creation story for anything on this planet. There's not the same belief within people within about 5 blocks of each other about something that happened yesterday. So I understand. The reality of it is Tolkien said 3 different things over the course of 40 years, and it's probably because he forgot. But in any case, the next thing I'm going to move into, there is controversy with orcs. A lot. So, Tolkien is not known for being exactly inclusive, supportive, or accepting of people that were not Europeans. He very much was a product of his time. He was very much the product of imperialism. He was very much that guy. So when he started describing orcs, they either had a Asian/Mongol-esque stereotypical description, or they had a Afrocentric kind of one. So, like when you talk about normal goblins, he mentions that they have sallow skin and slanted eyes and angular features with prominent front teeth. If anybody wants to go Google a World War II anti-Japanese poster, y'all can. I'll give y'all a second to do that if you want to. But it's there's
I know
one.
what they look like.
Yeah, there's one that is very much.
You can see it in old Bugs Bunny cartoons. They don't play anymore. Hell.
Oh yeah, the Tojo. But there's one specific. If you go find it, that very much looks like someone that was hella racist morphed a bad depiction of an Asian man with an orc. Large lower jaw, prominent front teeth and tusks, squinty eyes. That is the description Tolkien gave for goblins. When he started talking about the Uruk-hai, they were thick-lipped and dark-skinned. So Tolkien made foreigners the servants of Sauron, and it's a little problematic today. So there, I can understand a lot of people who get mad about that because that depiction was brought into the early version of D&D. Because, much like Emily mentioned, the very first game Gary Gygax helped make was called Chainmail, and it was a fantasy tabletop battle game, similar to what is now Warhammer or BattleTech, any of these things. And when he started making minis and using minis for orcs, they were Turks. He painted his Turk war figures green. And I do not suggest Googling if you can find any of the old ones. If anyone has an original first edition D&D miniature of an orc, it's on the same shelf that like a lot of old racist white southern ladies have full of Hummels that are problematic today. I think everybody in this group knows what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to go further than that in that description. And the problem with the depiction of orcs from first through even early 5th edition, the first initial release of 5th edition, orcs are automatically evil. No ifs, ands, or buts. Orcs are evil. They're not a playable race. Orcs usually become a playable race towards the end of any mid or end of an edition. But you're evil. If you're not evil, you have to take some serious penalties. However, in the last 3 years, 4 years, I think with the release of Mordenkainen's, maybe, or Erebor, Eberron, because in Eberron they took away the negative modifier for being an orc on intelligence, because they're like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't say all orcs are stupid, because maybe we don't need to say that everybody in this race has this ability, because even if someone's in a certain ethnic group, that doesn't mean automatically they know how to do something that is stereotypical of that ethnic group. But they've done some work to try to fix the origins. They've done some work to try to fix the troubled history and the writing. Because there's a couple really hot buzzwords that I'm not going to say on this stream, because then we got to put we would have had to put a warning at the very beginning for trigger warnings. But they're very prone to a couple of those activities in the earlier writings, and it's like that's why there's half orcs. And because there's some people who still today think that orcs and half orcs should be removed from D&D because of the insensitivity of their origins. Now, people also feel that way about goblins with anti-Semitism. Same thing with dwarves with anti-Semitism popping up. So there's several people that think some of these races need to be removed, or these ancestries need to be removed because of their problematic history within lore and within the series themselves. Because if you look at first edition, Gygax might have helped make this game that we all love to play, but there's put an asterisk next to his name with some of his other beliefs, because the man didn't think women knew how to do math, and he's fucking wrong on that. Rest his soul wherever it went. I don't know which of the devil lords of Avernus got it, but one of them did, because he had to make a deal to get all this done. Now, let's talk about the modern day. Modern day depictions of orcs do not have the sallow or the dark skin. Most of the time, they're green. Most of the time they're green, and there's a couple reasons for that. One of them's Warhammer, which I'll talk in a second. The other one is for a very long time, green paint was cheap. It's kind of like why the Hulk was gray initially, is because gray ink was cheaper than green in the 60s. And some of this is to distance itself from Tolkien so that you could not be sued by the Tolkien estate. Because if there is one group that is sue happy because they're going to live off of granddaddy or great granddaddy's achievements, it is the Tolkien estate. Hashtag please don't sue me, Tolkien estate. I don't have the money for you to sue me. You'll get a candy bar and a Coke. Now, in the earliest edition, I think all the way back to the 78 Monster Manual, they were one of the earliest monsters you could fight. You couldn't play them. And they became an iconic lower to mid-level encounter is a horde of orcs or a war band of orcs. And so it's like you'd have goblins that you'd fight wolves and goblins, then you made it to orcs. Now, because of this, other media started to grab them, like Warhammer. They grabbed them and they said, "Hey, look, they're not doing all this stuff because it's cruel or evil. It's literally their culture, and war fulfills them." And then they went further when they introduced 40K to where they're alien space fungus beings that they believe something, so it happens. You paint something red, it goes faster. You put bang bang, the gun fires louder and harder. You staple a dude's head back onto his body, he's healed, so it works. They're a semi-sentient hive mind fungus that the harder you believe, the more it's going to work, and that's slightly inspirational. It also makes me worry about mushrooms. Now, also Warcraft. Now, one of the biggest things to shape the depiction of orcs in modern media is going to be the game of Warcraft. Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2 were my jam back in the 90s. Tactics computer game. They made big, thick, beefy boys that were orcs. They are green, they are mean, they have battle axes, and they are here to be seen. That is what they were about. They showed up, flexed their muscles, and smacked your boys in the next week. And because of how popular Warcraft was, and then especially the follow-up of Warcraft Online, or what is it called? Warcraft Online? World of Warcraft. There we go. I totally know things about video games and shit. I totally know nerd culture from a decade ago. Shit. Orcs very much became something that was out there. And then they introduced some things because lore in the game that orcs were green because they made a deal with some demon lord in his blood. And so that orcs now are coming in every shade that you want, not just green. That works. But initially in that game, if you play Warcraft 1 and 2, orcs came from hell. They came through a dark portal from hell, and they're here to take over the world. So that kind of links back to the Orcus thing we said before. But the last thing I will leave this with is I found a fun fact. Orc is a slang term for Russian soldiers and gangsters. Mostly used in Ukraine right now because they have fun counting orcs, is what they call it. Y'all can probably figure out what I mean by that, but orc is a slang term for Russian soldiers. I thought that was just kind of a neat thing. That most of the time people give orcs kind of like I said, they give them an Eastern European accent. And I guess we think that, or we do that for them because we assume overbearing government, overbearing attitudes, harsh. Yeah, that orc fits for that. It's why in Topher's upcoming game next week, Kegamoth will sound like this the entire time he talks. Hello, I'm here to do business. So, and it kind of fits. So I just thought it was kind of fun that became a slang term for them.
Why, yes. I mean that orcs. That it used to be common video game or else gamer knowledge in general. Orcs used to be the punching bag of everybody, but I believe that orcs, shouldn't just be reserved as the punching bag, because then that they can be very much a BBEG, a big bad evil guy for any games and stuff. But that was a very good history lesson about orc.
Well, I was going to say this, Spence, if we got time for just a second, is and y'all have played in my games. I like to throw a spin on things. So, like, all of a sudden you run into goblins. So it's like, yeah, our first encounter. And then it turns out the goblins are actually the good guys. I've thrown that one in there more than once. But with Kegmoth in Chris's upcoming game, his name is Kegmoth Larry's son. His dad is the biggest, beefiest dad bod orc you could think of. And he likes to make chests because he's a woodworker and weaving baskets. His conquest is to weave the perfect basket and create the perfect travel trunk. And Larry is the most chill dude ever, is what I've sent to the DM. We'll see if he goes with it or not, but I wanted something like that because Kegmoth is going to come out as a very good boy, and I've already proved it tonight. It's going to be hard for me in that game because Kegmoth doesn't curse. He's going to say, "Are you taking a cheese with me? Or are you taking a cheese with me?" Instead of saying, "Are you taking a piss? Or are you fucking with me?"
Right.
So
I mean,
I'm gonna have to work so hard, guys, to not curse and to be such a good boy, because Kegmoth is a good boy. I am
you
not.
can do it. I believe in you. I have been doing it for almost about a year and a half, so it's fine. But anyway, I do think then that that we have all. I do believe that we all have all passed our investigation checks this time around, and then that very well good topic. Then that of course that that nobody wanted to cover humans because wait a minute, we all are humans. We humans are boring. But anyway, then I am going to leave it to Miro for basically the announcements and Frey for our socials.
All right, everybody. Schedule stuff. So tomorrow we will be back with Holy Winds. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday will be the session 0, maybe session 1 for Graves game, which let me pull up Discord so I know exactly what the name is, because I am totally prepared and everything here. The Redwell Chronicles, which will be a Pathfinder 2E game. And then Thursday would be, well, Thursday we won't. We just got an announcement that one of our 3 players for Tears of Kairos will not make it. Or are we going to actually run Tears of Kairos? Nasa, you're the DM for that.
Um, I mean, if y'all wanted to run it with just the two of you, we could, but otherwise, I think it'd be better to wait for.
I'm with y'all on that.
Waiting.
Yeah,
Let's wait. So we will be running a Monster of the Week. What did y'all vote on? Moving Pictures.
correct.
All right, so we'll be playing the Monster of the Week game, Moving Pictures, which I have in a notebook here. So that'll be fun. And then we'll be here with a toolkits next Sunday, which I'll be painting minis. Anyone else can be working on whatever. It's an excuse for us to hang out, craft, and talk. That is the point of toolkits. And then we'll continue on with the normal schedule. But we have something going on. We're going to have back-to-back bonus roundtables because January is one of those months with 5 Sundays. So we're going to be talking about the video game. I guess spoiler alert: video game twists of some of our favorite video games on the last Sunday, and then the first Sunday of February, we're going to take on the controversial topic that is currently lighting the RPG world on fire because WotC decided to self-immolate about the OGL, and we all have opinions on that. Strong ones. So, yeah, those are the that's the schedule for now. We might have something wibbly wobbly of a new podcast popping up in the next couple weeks. We will see. And I'll turn it over to my lovely, beautiful wife to do our socials.
Great okay. We are on Twitch, quite obviously, and on YouTube and on Facebook. As Team Bonus Action, where I just finally changed our icons back from green Christmassy because I'm slow like that. We are also on Instagram at Team Bonus Action. We are at bonus_team over on Twitter. Facebook and Twitter are where you can check us out to make sure that when we're going live. Over on our YouTube page, you can watch all of our previous videos and shenanigans. And we also have our website, teambonusaction.com. So you can always check out over there, read more about what we're all about and things like all that good stuff. So, yeah, that's all.
Oh, well, then I think then that is just going to about do it. And then since that Knox isn't here,
Don't let your
No.
meat
don't let your
Hello,
meatloaf.
Clove. Oh my God,
We
that
will
was.
get it one day.
Yeah, we
Oh,
will.
bad!
That was bad.
That was
Ooh.
bad, bud.